bring here people with different points to offer us an opportunity to think about our country now in 5 years and 10 years and how we should and how to address the issue of decriminalization of drugs. And to moderate this panel, I brought a person who is a friend of Freemind, I think since the first Freemind, since our first edition, Dr. José Carlos Cossenzo. A round of applause for Dr. Cossenzo. He is a criminal justice prosecutor. He's been working there for 36 years. He's the director of institutional relations of the National Council of São Paulo and chair of Promocred. He also works at Conjur in Fiesp. He played a relevant role in famous criminal cases such as the Free case. He was the chair of the Brazilian Association of the Public Prosecutor's Office, and he had been the coordinator of strategic matters of the Public Prosecutor's Office, and he's a great friend. Cossenzo, welcome. A round of applause for Cossenzo. Well, also comprising this panel, I'd like to call our dearest friend, Dr. Marcelo Ribeiro. A round of applause for him. He's a psychiatrist specialized in addiction with an MA and a PhD from Unifesp. He's also an affiliated professor. He was the technical director of CATORG, and he presided the São Paulo Council about drugs, and from 2019 to 2021, he's a coordinator of a course on addiction of our Albert Einstein Institute, focus on research on the use of substances with crack users. So I remind you that we are live streaming the entire event in 3 languages: Portuguese, English, and Spanish. At each panel, our friend Gerson uploads a web link for that panel, and that web link stays in our channel so that you can watch all our discussions later. This year, Cosens, we are launching a pocket free mind. We're going to send it for cities who wish to hold a free mind event with one of the panels at night. So the idea is that person to people watch the panel and then discuss it so that we can spread the information we share here. Now continuing, Egon Schutler, did I did I get it right? Our dear friend Egon from the Blue Cross. He's uh, he specializes in addiction and therapeutic communities, and he's the General Secretary of Brazil's Blue Cross. A round of applause. And the next person, our dear friends, who's from Campinas as well, Dr. Guilherme Ataíde Ribeiro Franco. A round of applause. He is a justice prosecutor specialized in addiction from Uniad Unifesp. He is associated to ABAD, Brazilian Association of Studies on Alcohol and Other Drugs. He was a member of GTIDA, integrated work groups on drugs and alcohol of the São Paulo Prosecutor's Office, and he was an attorney and state prosecutor. So a round of applause for the participants of this panel. Dr. Cosenzo, here is your team. I'm handing to you the panel 10 to 9. So you're going to hand it over back to me at 10:30. No, that's okay.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. We were here adjusting our what are we going to do in the panel. We were supposed to have nearly 20 minutes for each speaker, and later we are going to have 20. Each speaker is going to talk for 20 minutes, and then we will open for discussions and questions. I'd like first of all to rec- to talk about how happy I am to be here at this moment, and I think I'm here as one of the members of the Brazilian Public Prosecutor's Office. We had another friend here, right, yesterday, Mário Sérgio Sobrinho. Here we have Guilherme Ataíde Ribeiro, who is my friend, my brother, one of the most wonderful people you can find in the institution I work at. I'd like to greet you all for the work you develop, seeking citizenship, seeking to build citizenship. And for me, that's making history. A history of good, a history of social construction, integration, of receiving people, and especially saving a history in saving lives. So I thank this opportunity for being here with highly qualified people, and that represents a huge step for a society that is constructive and dedicated to the public cause. I by far saw a Franciscan priest, and I am a follower of Saint Francis. So, so I wish peace and good to everyone, because this is truly the best definition of Saint Francis. So I'd like to say the following. Yes, you have this mission, which is Freemind's mission, which is to help people to help more people. So thank you very much for welcoming me so well. And I'm sure that you have my respect due to the work, mainly to the work you develop. Even though it weren't necessary to do, because formal compliments to Freemind, I'd like to say the following things. I wrote down a sentence. Sometimes I forget what I'm going to say, and then, but I wrote down Cora Coralina's quote: "Happy is the person who transfers knowledge and learns what he teaches." So, from my experience in my institutional career, and sharing things with society, and with these three speakers here, I'm sure they will offer great teachings to you. But most importantly, is to share, debate, being humble, and be sure that what they're going to discuss with you is fabulous, but what they're going to receive from you in this discussion is wonderful as well. So the most important thing is not to wanting to teach and offer knowledge, but also seek what every one of us needs. So in this event, you have very important people in this field, in the entire world, basically, and they all come together here to discuss advanced practices in prevention, treatment, and reintegration of chemical dependence. So I will make my own reinterpretation of what Freemind is. And I really like this theme, which is the mission and omission of society. My entire life, I've been discussing what's the government's responsibility and social responsibility. Our times today is a moment of reflection. The state, our state, with all due respect, this is not a political critic. It's just something I verified. It's something. So the political dichotomy we see everywhere. The state promises a lot, but actually the state does not do, and the entire responsibility lies on society. So people used to say to me, look, we in the Article 6 of our social constitution, we have social rights, dignified life, dignified housing, sports, leisure, safety, all of that. And I ask you, what is the state offering to you? Do you know anyone who said, no, I don't need to have private health insurance because I have SUS. I don't need safety. I see the people from the military police over there. I don't need safety because safety services, security services, because there's no violence in my region. If an individual does not have a dog or a private security service or bars, so it's difficult. So we are facing a difficult situation. We used to be proud of studying in public schools, but today it's like, oh my, oh no, he has a child who studies in a public school. That's not seen as a good thing. And who is going to solve all those issues? Is the state or society? Maybe we can collaborate a lot. So, but I wish to thank this invitation to be here. We have a great discussion ahead of us. And today we're going to discuss the decriminalization, okay? And we're going to say at least within the currents we work in, and most importantly, in a conference, in debates, it's important to bring people who have different points of view, different positions, so that we can reflect. Talking to people who think the same as I do, it's not interesting. So today we have a big difficulty to understand, and we have a great difficulty to understand the other. The country is divided in political terms, and it's also divided in terms of the drug issue. Are we going to legalize drugs or not? Decriminalize or not? So there are pros and cons. I'm not going to give you spoilers because I know that people are more qualified than me to speak about that. But I like to say that I have already been a speaker, and but I feel much better here as a moderator because I come here to learn. Although I didn't take any course on speaking, I felt good in speaking, but maybe I can specialize in listening as well. So I will listen to you very carefully together with everyone, and I am sure we will have a great moment here. So can I start with you? So I know it's not because he's from the public prosecutor's office. Maybe it's because I'm afraid of the public prosecutor's office. Well, according to Guilherme's humbleness, the most important ones will go last. Based on the logical regarding the logics about the issue we are going to discuss here, you have, and I believe Guilherme is the first one. So Guilherme is a fighter of the public prosecutor's office. He works a great social work, and he could as many stay at home waiting for cases to come and then speak. Today we faced changes in our institution. Many stayed in their positions comfortably, but then since 1988, we have started to have people who work on the social side, and you can only have citizenship if you work with people who exercise citizenship. And I really respect him, and he's a great friend. So please, 20 minutes. You have 20 minutes to talk. So each one will have 20 minutes to talk so that we will have time for discussions and questions. So I have the honor to give the floor to Guilherme. Thank you very much for listening to me. And thank you, Dr. Egon Schuttler. I took a while to be able to get. It's a privilege, a joy. It's a great responsibility to be here, especially after the words said by my dearest friend, teacher, uh, brother, as he is no little Italian, José Carlos Cossenzo. My greetings to my dearest Dr. Marcelo Ribeiro, Dr. Egon Schutter. I'm almost getting there with the pronunciation. It's better, right? It's getting better. Schutler. Okay, so let's go. Marijuana. What is there? So this is a Maconia sweet. Is a marijuana sweet. It's a homemade hyperconcentrated. To get to there to obtain that, it's 80% of tetrahydrocannabidiol. This is homemade, and its first balance is very severe burn in those who manipulate cannabis to get to that. So we had Halloween. Halloween was yesterday. So there's a Halloween costume in the U.S. states that have incorporated THC to its culture. That kid was sent to an ER because he was poisoned with those tiny sweets over there. Is it here? Okay, over there. These little sweets that are made of Delta 8 THC. It's the brother of Delta 9 THC. And here, a Texan young man, the young man from Texas, when he arrives at the hospital, this is his TS scan. He did not consume cannabis, marijuana, but he consumed an e-cigarette. We'll talk about that later, which is a product that we can put several substances, but they are highly explosive. And when he got to the hospital, the doctor asked, "Did you write down the plate of the car?" Because the e-cigarette exploded while he was smoking it. Should I point to the panel or to? Oh, I point here. Okay. Opium War, 19th century, the guerrilla in the silent mode. What happened? Geopolitical disputes. England dominated the world in the 19th century. Benefited that in China, culturally, they used opium, but not at a trading scale. But what did England do? Dominated China in the episode of the Opium Wars and legalized forcefully opium. What happened? In 1906, 1/4 of the adult male Chinese population was addicted to opium that was forcefully legalized after those wars. If there were not the Shanghai Convention, today we would have 3 times more opium consumption than we record today in the world. Today, opium has other varieties, as we will see, synthetic opiaceums, which are stronger than opium from poppy flower. So, Brazil, the US, Cuba, Venezuela, Canada, Uruguay, and China, they all reach their consensus because no one will be able to build a nation that is high, that does not is not a political ideology. It's a project. It's a purpose of a nation. So I ask you, is marijuana the opium of the 21st century?
From Shanghai to date, I'm always going to have this geopolitical perspective. Who gains with this market acculturation of drugs? We need to have a prevention culture. We linked to the Brazilian constitution. So I always provide this reading based on the 1988 constitution because I'm a law professor. So if we think of a Christmas tree, we have the star on top. That is where we have the principle of the wholesome health, the integral health of children and youth, where we'll have several free minds, and prevention is therefore part of a democratic state. Leviathan of Hobbes is not well interpreted today. Leviathan was needed so that there were no excess in terms of self-inspection, vengeance, as we see today, scenarios dominated by organized crime, where our dear fellow public prosecutor acts. So this slide is from 2018. No news to it. But just for you to see that Brazil was a target for narco-capitalists. Dr. Marcelo Ribeiro taught me this term, narco-capitalist. So it would be the green country. So there's a bit of greenwashing here. When we talk about date 89 THC, it's always green. It's as if it were only a plant, like granny's tea, chamomile tea, and it is not. It's very psychoactive. It's a substance today that is increasingly more intense because this window of medical cannabis will not produce that many billion. Will not produce that many billion. It will not disrespect children. It will be good for children who have epilepsies, refractory epilepsies, which fortunately is a modest number. It is not that, but will make that it's so interesting to create medications without conflicts of interest. We've seen in the films, for example, when they prescribed nicotine to treat anxiety on pregnant, when Father Christmas promoted nicotine, and now we know what the result is. We will have 2 panels with 2 excellent specialists on that right after this. So, Dr. Cosenso, when I joined the public prosecutor's office, there were not tests and exams on this. Otherwise, I would fail for sure. In Colombia, is projecting paths for legalization not only for cannabis, but also of cocaine. This is what the slide shows, because there's this perspective that the Colombian GDP will be increased in 3 times with this movement. Will be increased 3 times with this movement. Well, we're not in Colombia, but we are in Expo Cannabis Brazil, the Smoking Culture Fair held in 2023. In which will be also hosted in São Paulo. I also talk about smoking culture. The window of the medical cannabis itself is not sustainable anymore in terms of in the very own promoters of this movement. And what is sad, in my view, is that it's targeted at a public that is originally linked to the Department of Agriculture of the state of São Paulo, and the intern Mirella, which helped me put together this presentation, said, look at this arrow. Medicine is very shy at the corner. The arrow first shows the smoking culture, and then another window here, agrocannabic. But this is reality. These are the sponsors of a fair of cannabis that will happen this month in São Paulo. Next slide, please. Of course, this is a product of the organized crime, but it's also derived from an acculturation of THC in the North Hemisphere. So these snacks have a certain percentage of it in them. Here we have Olive, that due to his mother, Elizabeth, buying the medical cannabis, which is inappropriately coined like this, and she forgot the colorful candies. This child ate some of these candies, was admitted to hospital, was very sick, and they're big people, big sharks like cannabis thinking, because now there's the Anglicanism of legalizing these products in Brazil, deeply believing that children will not have access. So it's PL 39915. The state of Colorado in the US, look at the huge, the exponential growth of child and toddler intoxication due to the consumption of these psychoactive in the form of candies, sweets. Halloween now, the Colorado police warns that the parents need to be careful to where their children will ask for trick or treat, because there will be a trick that will devastate these brains under formation. Again, the exponential growth to the human exposure to these products based on THC. In PL 3195, which is in process, it will allow for products bought while Geno food and food supplements with with 0.1% of THC. Now the bill that justifies that, in its justification, includes a company that is hidden here called New Frontier Data, which is this great business hub of THC. What they really want for Latin America is, we will help you identify products or segments which will have greater benefits and markets that are edible, beverages, intoxics. Where is medicine? Where are the children with epilepsy who are benefited already with legalized products? Legalized by Anvisa, we have a rule, we have a law, and we have in the state of São Paulo a plan of a law that allows for the prescription of products. They're not medications yet for epilepsy, refractory epilepsies, and other pathologies, but nothing that justifies a market of billions. I always make this parallel. Big cannabis is big nicotine of the past century, of the last century. This is a plantation of cannabis, of industrial cannabis. This is the plantation of cannabis ruderalis, that is industrial cannabis, because Spain surrendered to this narco-capitalist movement to produce fiber, clothes, flip-flops, and also extraction of cannabidiol. Back to the plantation, please. It's not industrial cannabis. It's a variety of cannabis, marijuana, probably cannabis sativa, extremely potentialized in THC, at a farm that was dedicated for a legalized industrial cannabis plantation. Hundreds of acres of THC. Can you imagine this in Brazil? If we succumb to the narco-capitalist interests of the plantation of hemp. So from hemp, you extract the cannabidiol, but you can also extract this from a native Brazilian tree. But have you ever heard of grandiuva, a native Brazilian tree where you can extract cannabidiol from? Why not? Because it does not produce THC. So it's called micantra in a Latin term or something like that. But you will, as a product, associated products, you get delta 8. Next one, please. And here, e-cigarette with delta 8 THC. This is already happening in the US. Once again, sweetened candies with THC. Catherine and Alexander started with cannabis, started with the acculturation of cannabis. It's a plant. So it's the medication for all ills of the world, from broken heart to a broken nail. And it's not about war on drugs, but defending that we have more people in our future. Next. To give you an idea, 10 milligrams of THC is considered a standard dose to generate some psychoactive effect on the user. On this little package of snacks, there were 600 milligrams of THC. 60 times more. 1,500 milligrams of THC can kill. This youth, this teenager swallowed an e-cigarette with THC. Next. Here, what do we have today in the streets of London? Cannabis that is produced today. So 13.4, and this archive, this file is out of date, 2004. Today, for sure, we have much more cannabis much more powerful in THC. Current cannabis damages much more than some years ago, and traffic will sell kits with 40 grams of marijuana. This is in Campinas because there was this decision to delegalize up to 40 grams or 40,000 milligrams of cannabis. Remember, standard 10 milligrams. The Supreme Court, Federal Supreme Court, allowed for the legalization of 10 milligrams and now 40 milligrams. And now the narco traffic has this little kits of 40 milligrams cannabis. And in the United States, 1 million reais evaluated in the industry to plant to plant indoor cannabis by the organized crime. But shouldn't we legalize? Because by legalizing, organized crime would disappear. What about cigarette today that is contrabanded? What about vapes that are illegally marketed? What if in vape there is THC and other substances? So it's much more a false argument in terms that legalized drugs will inhibit legalized crimes. Legalized drugs, greater consumption because greater availability because of the acculturation of substance. Narco media wants to gain new consumers. The younger the person, the greater the probability of addiction, decreasing the perception of risk, and greater consumption, and paving the way to the door to more drugs. It will not only stick to THC. So I ask you, who does this interest? Who is this interesting to in this current scenario where we not even legalize education for everyone? We didn't even legalize basic sanitation. Campinas has a basic sanitation network, but if we go to certain states in the Northeast, we will have about 10 to 15%. Who is this interesting to? My question is, aren't there more important agendas today than social experimentation with candies, lollipops, sweets, chocolates, beverages, and so on that are deviated imagination of the narco-capitalists created for children? Why THC in a snack for school and not books? In a country is made out of millions of brains, free minds, free brains. Thank you so much.
Eu sou, sou um democrata, eu sou.
I'm a Democrat and I'm a terrible time controller. But let's continue. How did you decide who's going to go? Oh, according to the sequence, it's my name, right? So let's go. Following Dr. Ataides' criteria. Okay, then, as there, as it was decided, Dr. Agan, he gave me that. So please spell for me Schlitter, Schlitter. So Dr. Agger Schlittler, he's from the Blue Cross. He has a life story that's amazing. He works in a institution that has a great responsibility, and it's a very important institution, and he's very committed to Brazilian society. So I will give the floor to him for 20 minutes. When there is 5 minutes left, I will raise here, I will tell you, okay? So please, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. As the Red Cross, it's a pleasure to be here again today. So special thanks to Paulo Martelli, to the conferences organization that's giving us this opportunity again. I also send here a warm hug of our president, but he was supposed to be here, but he had an urgent demand and he had to go to Europe and has just come back. So I have the mission of being here. So that's the Blue Cross's mission. I'm going to present here so everything is okay. So my focus will be regarding, I will talk about the prevalence of consumption of drugs, considering the policy adopted by a certain government or country. Please, the presentation. Thank you. So the author of this content is Mr. Ralph Hartman, So, of course, I also contributed to this study. And it's a recent study, a survey we conducted regarding the prevalence of the consumption of drugs, especially marijuana. So, us as a Blue Cross, we are clearly activists against liberation of drugs, against decriminalization of drugs, and most recently we joined also we joined we are against the regulation of e-cigarettes, against those gambling and bets, that those gambling games, bets. So we are living a pandemic regarding e-cigarettes and also regarding those gambling games. So I see here Roberto Lacerre, who advocates that for that cause too. So this light is always on. Yes. Okay. So we are a reference center on addiction. We work on prevention. We offer support groups, mutual help groups. We train people who work in the field, public policies as well, in a more intensely and continuously since 2010. So we have a clear agenda. We work with the federal government, the National Congress. We are pro of a drug-free life, and we are very clear about that. We cannot go against science. We cannot go against medicine or the will of the majority of the population. So we are activists, but we always respect science. So we are always based on science. And that harm is science-based. So I'm going to say that how an implemented policy has its consequences, as we will show in the numbers. So unfortunately, the activists in favor of liberation of drugs, they present their numbers, they distort, they they ignore technical scientific knowledge and provide their own tricky numbers. So I don't know if I'm going to do better than my colleague here on this slide thing. So as an introduction, uh, drug decriminalization, what is that? So what is decriminalization? Is the removal of the criminal issue. So those today who is caught consuming an illegal drug, that person has to serve certain administrative measures, community service, participate in an educational program, so as the judge determines. So there's a consequence to that. So today, our children and adolescents, they grow up knowing that it's a drug, illegal drugs are harmful to our health, and who consumes them face consequences because it affects the health of of the person and their family members. So it's a high awareness factor, a prevention factor to prevent the use of drugs as we work on drug prevention in the Blue Cross. So limiting access, knowing when the person knows it's harmful and that's why it is forbidden, it's an awareness factor and prevents. So it's different from legalization, which involves regulation and an example is tobacco. Tobacco, it's regulated, it's legal, but and there's a state control. So the idea is to regulate and control so precisely that it will not harm. There is that illusion. So that's why we bring this content as Blue Cross to address this theme. Please, next. That's what I will say. Okay. So prevalence of the use of marijuana in relation to legalization. Why did I choose marijuana? It's because marijuana was chosen to be the strategy to convince for later allow other drugs to be legalized. Dr. Ataide has already contextualized the history, the background, and unfortunately, marijuana, that medicinal issue, that illusion is being used to achieve later the legalization of other drugs. So the prevalence varies widely among countries depending on control and legalization policies. So we will analyze data that will reveal that legalization, either partial legalization where there is legalization, liberation but restriction, or totally legal and totally, as it happened in Uruguay. Whereas forbiddance tends to keep a lower prevalence. In other words, the percentage of the population who consumes when there is restriction is it's a lower number than in countries where there is legalization. Next. So, here we compare countries. The blue one, it's non-legalized. So these are the countries that adopted the public policy of non-decriminalization. Despite our Supreme Court's decision on the 40 grams, marijuana is forbidden. So we have here we have yellow countries. I'm colorblind, so I think it's kind of yellow. So so it's partially legalized, and we have the countries in which in red, in which marijuana is legalized: Canada and Uruguay. So we will start with countries in which marijuana is forbidden: Philippines, Indonesia, Turkey. Well, but Philippines, Indonesia, Turkey, Asian countries, they have a different political system. But we also have Norway, we also have Japan, Sweden, China. So in these countries, marijuana is forbidden. Now in China, remember, they experienced the Opium War. So can you imagine? So Singapore, Japan, Sweden, and Brazil. You will see the big difference. Now let's move on to the countries that have partially legalized marijuana. So they have regulated in a way that there will be no problem. The first problem is the increase in consumption. So here the maximum consumption is around 4%, whereas in countries with legalization reaches 18%, such as in some American states. So New Zealand, Australia, UK, France, Holland, Portugal, and the United States, where in some states of the United States, where is this partial legalization? There's no effect regarding reduction in consumption. And of course, in countries in which marijuana consumption is Uruguay and Canada. Canada has greater restrictions, but it adopted the legalization policy. So this is a very good, well-designed graph and depicts reality very, very well. So the illusion that legalization and regulation, with a restricted regulation, it has no effect. Next. So the prevalence of the use of marijuana and control policies. Partial or total legalization is associated to the increase in consumption. That's not me who is saying that, not Blue Cross, nor this group. But the surveys that were done up to now, that have been done up to now, countries that forbid marijuana present lower prevalence. So when you use prevalence of 4% in countries that forbid it, and prevalence reaches 18% in some countries that have legalized it. So countries in which is fully legal, which marijuana is fully legalized, Uruguay and Canada, have a high prevalence of 15.4, 14.8. So it's a social problem. It's a public health problem. The issue is who's going to pay for that. So there's that illusion that we are going to legalize and tax it. But it will not be worth it, just like with tobacco. Next, I'm focusing a lot on that because it's a data that is out there. This data are out there. So me as a lawyer, as an accountant, when I see these numbers, it's clear which policy we must adopt. So rationally, without being involved in any type of activism, we should be convinced. But the human being can juggle and with the ideas and numbers. So now Uruguay, total legalization, facilitated access, helped access, reduced risk perception. Me as Agan, I'd like to highlight that when the child or adolescent they grow up in an environment without that awareness regarding risk, that's highly harmful to society. And when we get to Canada, when we get to schools as a Blue Cross on the first days, that teenager says, "Come, oh, mister, no maconha, there's no problem with marijuana. What are you doing here?" But then when we create and establish a bond, we're able to work on that. But this perception, this culture that it's impregnated among society, it's terrible. It's terrible when that risk perception lowers when medicine science and the will of the population is when they are ignored. Now let's go to Canada. Despite the rigorous regulation, use increased to 14.8%, indicating normalization of the use. So even though, despite the awareness of a developed country, use became normal. At the end of this slide, I have the entire references I used to make this presentation. Next. So now here in the US, where some states have legalized consumption regarding the issue of production of alternative products, so marijuana, since the American people are very capitalist, they always think about that. So they have marijuana-based products. So in the states in which marijuana has been legalized, the prevalence of the population that uses it reaches 18%. That's nearly the proportion Brazil has regarding tobacco. Nearly 20% of the population uses tobacco. And in those states, and the problems that the media broadcasts are big. So partial legalization show that it cannot contain use, but promote social acceptance and consumption. This is specifically regarding American states, U.S. states. So now about impact, according to UNODC. So the legalization of cannabis in North America resulted in a daily increase, especially of highly powerful products. So, for example, the hemp plant crops to make products at an industrial scale. So the technology of agriculture, it will always produce plant with higher potential. So, oh, but I don't consume cocaine. But if I have some marijuana here or more powerful marijuana, it advances within the drug itself. Having marijuana with a higher THC concentration. So this increase in consumption has been accompanied by increase in hospital admissions due to consumption. So it's not only that child who ended up eating that product, but all the other health consequences to people's health, to the respiratory tract and overdose and other psychiatric disorders related to use. And we know that the person who uses it becomes a risk group regarding suicide as well. So the person who regularly uses marijuana and using increasingly powerful cannabis, it increases risk for suicide, and and that is particularly significant. These numbers are significant among mainly youth. So we saw an increase among young people. Now we have nargile as well. So now in shopping malls you have those stores, and you watch on their store windows. They sell these nargiles, and they are flavored, so they taste nice. And now we have the e-cigarettes. So it's a way that the industry finds. Industry seeks alternative to keep its market, and certainly marijuana is the great strategy of the tobacco industry to migrate to the cannabis industry, as it is already doing. So implications on public health are significant, especially among young people. This is a survey from 2002 by UNODC. Next, comparison between public policies, prohibition versus legalization. So prohibition reduces prevalence and health and public health issues associated to it. I'm going to mention two countries, such as Japan, highly developed. Sweden has also a very clear policy regarding alcohol itself. So all restrictive measures regarding access to the drug, they reduce prevalence. Legalization normalizes use. Therefore, it brings increase in consumption and problems related to public health. So here are the references, and next, implications on public health. So it's evident, science has showed, medicine verifies that legalization increases the prevalence and worsens public health issues, disorders, dependence. And studies show that young people are particularly vulnerable to the effect of the psychoactive effects of THC. So this was a survey from 2019-2014. Next, conclusion. The analysis indicates that decriminalization, legalization increased the prevalence of usage and reduced risk perception. So it's clear, it's been proven. Other countries were our pilot projects, let's say. So we are discussing now our public policy regarding legalization or not. What's our challenge? This information must reach our legislators. The Federal Senate approved very quickly that bill regarding the decision of the Federal Supreme Court, saying that Brazil is against the legalization of drugs and against the minimum use. But in the House of Representatives, the process is slow. Prohibition policies, although challenging, we cannot forget that these prohibition policies, they are more efficient to contain consumption. So these prohibition policies are more efficient, but they are challenging. But when the population notices the benefit, so for instance, regarding tobacco, Brazil has made a lot of progress regarding anti-tobacco policies. So restrictions regarding places of use. We see the difference. In 2018, I went to Germany, but I got so scared there because when I entered restaurants and the external parts or internal parts, people were smoking with no problem. We chose a place to have our meals according to the smell. Where we had too much cigarette smell, we didn't go to. And young people and women using it.
And unfortunately, e-cigarettes are making us walk back in terms of public policy. So the need to reinforce preventive policies and not normalize consumption. So collective conscience that it's an ill that cannot continue. So another reference from Laranjeira. Last slide. So here are the references of this survey, and with all information conveyed, they are published at scientific journals, and I can assure you here that this is a fact, and you cannot. And a fact is something that you can assess, evaluate. So we and you who are here, we need to be activists to promote life. We cannot create a society that is an addicted society that loses its independence and freedom. So that is our challenge. Thank you once again for the opportunity. Now I will give the floor back to our colleague. Thank you, Dr. Egan. Dr. Egan. I had not read his resume. He's a lawyer, a master's in accounting sciences, specialist in drug addiction and therapeutic communities, in addition to being the secretary of Blue Cross in Brazil. Of Blue Cross Brazil, our third panelist. I'd like to invite Dr. Marcelo Ribeiro, who's a psychiatrist specialized in drug addiction with a master and a PhD by Unifesp. Associate professor, was a technical director of CRETOC and presided the State Council on Policy on Drugs of the state of São Paulo. He has a course that he heads at Alba Sandin on specializes in drug addiction with focus on studies with crack users. Please feel free, Doctor. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you in another Freemind to talk about legalization and drug policies. It's a topic that I like a lot, but I discuss very little. I have my point of view, my ideas, because I develop my thoughts much based on conversations in classroom and other panels like this. I am very careful regarding that, especially after hear these two great panelists that said so many great things. I work with chemical dependency. I have been working in this with chemical addiction for over 25 years. In the last 10 years, I had the privilege working as a director at a service offered at Crackerland, discussing, meeting people, covering and serving human beings, drug users. When we start understanding that policies and laws, they are implemented way after reality has been installed. So when we reach it, it's already, so many things have already happened. So ideally, you have to think in situations. For example, it would be absurd to give cracks to users nowadays as a public policy action, but maybe in Crackerland we have We serve 30 people per day. It's a great calamity. People still use it, knowing that they will die. Maybe I wouldn't come here and tell my friend Egon, let's go to this place and to give these people crack because they're dying. I can imagine situations like this, and tobacco, which 100% legalized, and to be an optimist, 1/3 of it comes into the country illegally. I can think of the parties where most of the alcoholic beverages are falsified. So we work with a very flexible and plastified reality. And the status of marijuana today goes through this. People discuss, will it be legalized? Will it not be legalized? Will it be forbidden or not? Oh, it's absurd. You are harming the freedom of the person. But if you legalize, everything will go wrong. We have to stop polarizing. We have to see the evidence that are laid out, put on the table. So I prepared a quick presentation. I reviewed some articles from 2004, 2003 of countries that by countries or authors where countries had it legalized, whether Canada or Uruguay or the United States. So that discuss certain things later and think about them. So here a timeline that Guilherme very well presented to you. A very short timeline where, if we think of the United States in 37, which was the first to legalize it, 1937, which had certain legalization carried out in it, and the Netherlands for the first time starts flexibilizing marijuana, allows sales, the coffee shops, but how they reach the coffee shops, we have no idea at all. So I'm going to legalize the point of sale, but I don't know the rest of the market, of the trade. International traffic still happens. And then there were some flexibilizations, especially regarding medical cannabis, which unfortunately becomes this big marketing idea, marketing action, and it has prescription and recommendations for 2 types of child epilepsy, and it may serve for other things, but nowadays it's an array of off-label indications, scientifically proved these two, and unfortunately, as we know and as we have seen before, regarding tobacco and how we have tried to do today alcohol in an incipient manner, the industry today is much more powerful. And with cannabis, this is starting to happen. We see this industry of 50 billion today, but the prospect is that by the end of the next 10 years, what is moved by industrialized cannabis, it will be the 20th GDP of the world, around from 90 to 120 billion. And justifications such as medical cannabis are used to open the door, to pad the way and break justifications and enable legalization. So we have Uruguay in 2013, but the sales themselves started in 2017. Legalized 2013 and sold 2017 with the first national sale in Uruguay, and then Canada this following year. the American states had began also this movement, and some countries such as Switzerland is in this process, and Germany legalized it this year. So we have some movements pro-legalization that, well, within the context of the country might make sense. We have Canada. I don't understand, I don't have a proper reading to comment on that. But I'd say that Canada has this process of legalization that is more state controlled with rules, and that serves a specific range of the public. It serves, and people still buy in the illegal market despite that. So a part of it was legalized, but it does not resolve the problems as it said it would. Oh, let's legalize it, and then everything after that, everything will end. Violence, racism, favelas will be saved. Of course not. We know that's not true. Even people that were very convinced of this argument know that it's not that. You will serve a specific range, a specific public, just like Canada did. So it proposed to sell a certain type of cannabis with certain proportion of THC, a cannabidiol with limits. And we said, no, I want to smoke the way I wish, with how much THC I want, the way I want. I don't want to tell the state that I'm going to use it or present myself to the state. That's not how you resolve it. If well applied, it might have some utility. Maybe in a few decades we can say, no, let's legalize at this specific point to serve this specific public because they want to use it. Maybe we'll reach this. Maybe some countries are trying to reach this, but not this way, linked to capital. Drugs are amazing because if you start talking bad about capital, we are the ones talking bad about capital. So there's no ideology, there's no way of thinking or a ready-made policy that justifies this. You have to always be talking in groups and in synergy and always as an activist so that you can help somehow. So next one, please. I think the slide is a bit misplaced. If you put it in full screen mode, maybe it will solve the problem. There's the full screen mode. There it is. There it is. And by looking at the maps of the countries, in blue, the places where it is completely legalized, as Ergen said, regulated, and how it is sold and established. Here where it's illegal, but it's not a crime. Here it's illegal, but there is no structure of an enforcement. Ways of enforcing or repress. So people will use it, and despite being illegal, there's no enforcement structure to shy away the use. And here where it's completely illegal, once more, Uruguay was the country where regulation and legalization happened for the first time in South America, and then the other countries followed, and the most recent one being Germany. Next one, please. Yes, that is great. Now I brought some articles here. I'll be brief. So the effects of legalization and marketing of cannabis sativa, quoted because it's the term of the author. on mental health and use of substances and accidents. He did this very systemic review. They're from Canada, these guys, and so he collected 25 studies, especially from the US and Canada, and also evaluated some data from Uruguay. Also, to have an idea, and also in 2023, we had Uruguay legalizing marijuana for 6 years, Canada 5, and United States, depending on the state, from 5 to 6 years. Next, please. What he found then is that legalization associated to an increase in hospital admissions and ER services, and sales. The sale intensifies access and consumption with more substantial effects in certain groups and sexes. And studies show greater increase in intoxication after the opening of coffee shops, because there are countries that legalized it, and there are countries that legalized it, and then they had this process and regulated even the sale itself. So in the United States, where I made this presentation 3 years ago, and I reviewed it at the time, and this was in 2020. No, I think in 2020, people affirmed that the United States had 63,000 products based on cannabis that were patented. So when I say 63,000, when I say how many brands of mint candy there are here today, or of some other type of candy, so snacks, water with cannabidiol. So it's a gigantic industry today, which is the industry that wants to get in here without any regulation, where we see that we already have this. These countries are starting to notice that they have a new problem, identical to the one that we had when we smoked cigarette, where there was advertisement and we thought it was amazing. You think better. The young people smoke. The lads will smoke to become the boys will have to smoke to become men. Cannabis today is seen this way. So you smoke because you will be free. The industry will start capitalizing gradually this idea that was predominant in the 1960s and transform it into an appeal, into commercial allure, and people will use it more, smoke more, and of course this impacts public policy and public health. In the same very own study, effects on mental health and the use of other substances, effects on the consumption of opioids and alcohol, it's inconclusive. It's very early, the stage of these studies. There are some indices that the use of cannabis might reduce mortality because of opioids, because people use lots of opioids, but it's still inconclusive. In mental health, increased in psychosis and schizophrenia cases. So it's very clear that if you smoke more, you will have more psychosis cases. That's a fact. That's something I discuss a lot when justifications against it reach me. Okay, if you want to legalize, okay, you can legalize, but then you'll have this problem to think about. It's not an invention not to legalize. No, if you can legalize it, but this will happen. You have greater cases of psychosis. If society wants to legalize it, then it will have this new problem. Evidence of direct impact of legalization in in the rates of suicides and harms and damages are still inconclusive. Next.
Non-intentional problems. So more traffic accidents, accidents in traffic was noticed after commercialization. So if you have more marijuana, you have more points of sales, more access, which is another issue. I read an economist, that's my friend. He discusses with me. He has never used drugs. He barely drinks, but he has that idea like, no, it's better to regulate because it does not impact consumption. Yes, it does impact on consumption. So if I legalize, who will not use will continue to not using. Yes, those who don't use will continue not using if you legalize marijuana today. If legalized today, I will not say, oh, I think I will taste it. There will be this profile of people that are older who want to try. But most people won't want to try. But those who use will use more. And who transacts the economy of the substance are those people who use more. So that smaller percentage that drinks less starts to drink more of that alcohol traded in that country. That's the same in every country, and marijuana is the same thing. If you think about us, why in the supermarket you have those sweets near the cashier? Because during your shopping, you're thinking about rice, beans. You're not going to get the chocolate during that. You're going to get the essential items. The chocolate you'll get at the end. But what has to happen for you to get in the end when you're going to pay? You need to have access. We conducted a study with crack users, and we interviewed users that were admitted in therapeutic communities in 6 states. During 1 year, we interviewed them. One of the papers we've published, we saw obviously everybody who's here, everybody who was admitted were crack users. So those who had access and among your friends, most of them smoked, someone smoked, most of them smoked, one smoked. That were the options. So when you were less than 15 years old, having access to marijuana was easy, very difficult, very easy. The same questions to alcohol. So the people who had many friends who used crack, usually used crack 4 years earlier, and who had access to marijuana easily 5 years earlier. So what matters is that when you have access at a moment of your life in which your brain is developing, and you have not yet learned how to offer solutions to complex issues of life, what you're going to do? You'll be loyal to your friends. You are not able to solve complex problems. You argued with the mother of your girlfriend. What are you going to do at that moment? So you panic. What am I going to do now? What will happen to me? So you're not an adult that you're going to sit down and think, and you are embarrassed to ask your brother, your father, your friend, and you're going to say, oh, I discussed with my girlfriend's mother. What will I do? I feel horrible. What will I do? You'll look for a solution based on the loyalty of your group. If they are available, so the chances of that young people to use, it's a lot bigger, so they use earlier. So we must consider these issues, these aspects. So I got carried away here. This is an editorial text from Lancet, which is one of the most important scientific magazines, scientific journals, I'm sorry. Researchers such as mine, if we publish at Lancet, I can retire. And I said, oh, I've reached the peak of my career. It's great. It's amazing. It's like appearing on Fantastical for 5 times in sequence. So it's a very important magazine. So it has an editorial text published recently saying basically the same thing as this review paper. There was an increase in hospitalizations and ER regarding cannabis in the US and Canada after legalization and for recreational use. That's and recreational places of use. So that's how we call places they can use. So increase in cases of psychosis and schizophrenia. Fatal and accidental injuries, increase in accidents in traffic. So, just to summarize that. So he concludes by saying that cannabis legalization is associated to adverse effects on public health, especially regarding its impact on the public health system. So this must be considered to mitigate risks to the population. So here the magazine is thinking about the idea that since legalization worked here, and it seems that it's here to stay, so they are thinking about that. We have to treat this as we treated cigarettes back then. So otherwise things will scale. Even in Canada, it's had 2 years. It's in a 17% level. It's not that's going to scale. That's how my father-in-law thinks. Not because it became legal that 100% of the country will say, "Oh, I'll start using now." We know that's not true. But those who use tend to use more because they have more access to it. Next. Impact of legalization and decriminalization of cannabis on acute intoxications. This is a review paper from the journal Addiction, and I think they are from Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So their review paper found a significant increase in intoxication from cannabis after change in the legalization and decriminalization laws. They were strongly happened among children and after eating cannabis-based products. So although legalization brings benefits to control and regulate use, of course, for the age group that enjoys that legalization in practice, that today in these countries these people are those who come from a elite world, white male world. They benefit from that legalization, but the rest of the population finds little or less benefits. So although legalization brings benefits regarding use and control, there is an adverse impact on public health. For instance, intoxication in pediatrics environments. Next, here is an update by the Canadian government. They issued a legislative report on the cannabis law of 2018. It's the first update after 5 years of legalization. So they talk about the regulated industry and the reduction of the illegal market, significant reduction of prisons, arrests, so appearance of products with high concentration of THC and use among children, so especially accidental but also not accidental, and need to strengthen prevention and policies and access to medicinal cannabis, which another is an access to medicinal cannabis is a dubious thing because I believe that's a marketing strategy. The same as tobacco industry used that thing as I smoke because I need to think and I find myself, we have something in common. The same thing that fell apart. this thing related to cannabis must fall apart as well. It's of course it exists. It's becoming something that's technical. It's a reality, but it's not for everyone. Far from being for everyone. I don't know if I spent too much time. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation. Here, this is a review paper from statistics. Which it's the IBGE of Canada. 5 years since legalization, what have we learned? So they noticed that there was an increase in consumption. In 2021, 22% of Canadian people used in the past year, in the year before, especially youth from 2018 to 24. Other things are, it doesn't matter here what went up, what went down, what is stable. It's their concern. So legalization reduced significantly crimes due to possession, especially, but illegal exports and imports still occur, representing 67% of the offenses in 2022. The last one, let's see if I have one more. I'm going to talk about that, and that's it. I bought this review paper because it was conducted by a bank. Not by a bank, by the Central Bank of Kansas in the US. So a bank, a private institution, it's analyzing the benefits and social costs and economic of the legalization of recreational marijuana. And what did they conclude? That legalization at this moment has offered an increase in per capita income. They injected like 10 billion in the economy. So there was, on the other hand, there was an increase in disorders due to the use of substances in 17%, increase of homeless population, and arrest rates have also increased. That's another discussion I'm not going to make here, offer here. But this legalization at the first moment, it privileges the hetero white man. The black person, the indigenous, the woman, they have less money. So I'm going to sell marijuana in my boutique. Of course, if I have money, I'm going to pay for it. I was paying 20 reais in the slums. I will pay 200, no problem. And I don't have to go to the slum. But who can pay for that? Who can afford that? Those who have money. Those who don't have money are still exposed, and they are more arrested. So states that legalized first experienced economic benefits, but the social costs were higher. So that's social cost. You increase access, you have this variable factor. And those who are affected are the frequent users, the regular users. So like alcohol, who drink more, consumes more alcohol in that country. Thus, they suffer more the consequences. So states that plan to regulate can expect less benefits because the industry is already being installed. They are already present in the states, and the others who start opening, they don't become subsidiaries, of course, because there's a local population and the industry wants to establish itself there. But you make less, the state, makes less profit, not profit actually. It receives less taxes, less benefits. So it also partially, it's a fallacy that this will solve that situation. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much. And then I give back the floor to you. Thank you very much. I made some notes, so it's easier for me to place my notes here so that I can read them. Well, as I said, we had an expectation here. Well, I think we overcame our expectations. I believe that the natural conclusion of all of us, we had Dr. Guilherme, who said that he is absolutely against legalization. Dr. Agan uh, also concluded against drugs, gambling, and other addictions. Dr. Marcelo, a scientist, he examined and established in a technical way the possibility of use despite the warnings, and said very clearly that this is an obligation of society, and society should necessarily manifest itself in this sense. So I will take the freedom. I said we would talk about a sensitive topic. For some, is a cruel topic. For others, is a wrong manifestation of the legislator. Others, severe intervention of the judicial branch in the executive branch. And we had the rebound effect, the opposite effect. Immediately, the National Congress was against this activism of the Federal Supreme Court, and mainly the Federal Supreme Court acted due to the omission of the legislative branch. That's what I'm telling you. If we start to discuss, we would have a 3-hour lecture talking about the issue of the system, how the system works, and how the judicial branches, executive branch, and legislative branches, how they are acting. But the decriminalization of drugs, as Dr. Marcelo said, we had the poll on guns. How do people ask for? When you ask to a legal expert, the person will say, "We live in a democracy. We choose our representatives so that they can legislate for us, make the laws for us. And we, legal experts, we defend both, we criminalize or decriminalize." So what's the conclusion that we reach? Those who are pro-legalization understand that there will be a reduction of illegal trade, quality control, and tax collection, higher tax collection. And because of that, Dr. Marcelo said very well, and the three of them actually said very well. They made it clear that the state, according to those who are pro, the state will control and tax that drug production, and the revenue that from it would be dedicated to prevention and education. Those who are against legalization talk about unquestionable. They have three unquestionable arguments. First, increase in use, especially among young people, and increase of health problems, impact on mental health, use of psychoactive drugs, worsening anxiety and depression, risks to public health, increased risk to public health due to cardiovascular diseases and respiratory diseases. These were, that's what we see as difficulties. I asked Paulo Martelli, and he said the following: it is clear that you all have many questions about everything that has been said here. But Freemind, its organization, and if you can ask your questions, they will be sent to the panelists and answered individually. What I can try to help you. I'm a criminal prosecutor, and I issue expert opinions in the lower courts. But I will be didactic here. When the case starts,
the prosecutor will file a complaint, the lawyer will defend it, both arguments are shown, and the judge will decide. The person that the side that does not agree with the judge's decision will go to the appellate court, And at this appellate court, it goes to the public prosecutor's office, and the public prosecutor, like my case, we will express our opinion in the file. Out of the top of my mind, I can give you some examples. I'm sorry, but it's very intimate the way we're talking. Today, I could call it a diagnosis. What reflects our work is very frightening. For example, I'm a criminal prosecutor, and you divide by matter. So we have prosecutors that work in habeas corpus and writ of mandamus, the one that works in diffuse rights, and the ones that work at civil. Most of them work at the criminal court. We are 155 criminal prosecutors. I don't worry because I'm number 155. I'm the last one. So this number to me is always recorded in my mind. So statistics show today that we have approximately between 55 and 50% of the entire volume of processes that I receive, of the files I receive, are files regarding narco traffic, most of which cocaine. The greatest volume, cannabis. And we have also, after this percentage, we have theft, first robbery, then theft, because robbery is theft with violence, and then the remaining files, because there are several crimes, but what has increased very dramatically is domestic violence, and domestic violence has 3 A's of interpretation. The ones that want to interpret it as that the state is acting well is that it's increasing because women are trusting policy, justice, and will inform they report the aggression. Those that don't think this way say that, yes, in fact, it is increasing due to the use of alcohol and drugs. And then you have a third interpretation, that is, society today is becoming more politicized, and women is at a better position now in society. So they're not, being heard. They decided to use their voice, especially in front of their children. So I'd like to help contribute with this discussion. I lost a credential at Fiesp, then I put it in my pocket and was able to find it. Oh, I found my credential. I'm so very happy for that. Well, so last week I was a prosecutor at the beginning of my prosecutor in 1982 at a town called Estrela do Oeste, close to Jales, Fernandópolis, Palmeira do Oeste, Santa Feira do Sul. At that time, there were a bit more than 4,000 inhabitants there. Last week, I was assigned a file from a town called Populina, and I thought, wow, drugs, traffic, at such a small town, 3,000 inhabitants, more or less. So I'm going to try to contribute, or I will annoy the appellate judges. So I went to Google Maps and found the size of each town, the population of each town, and the boundaries, the frontiers of each town, the borders of each town, their income per capita, their occupation, and the largest, has 8,000 inhabitants. Populina has 3,500 inhabitants. Popus Lina, small population. That's the origin of the name of this town. There's one called Fatima Paulista. There's another one called Florida. Another one called El Dorado. And I said, no, that's not possible. That in such a small town you have drug trafficking in excess. So they seized 42 kilos of cocaine for such small town. Wow, that's completely incomprehensible. And why is that? What is our concern? Well, we have to convince the courts, and I'm going to make it very clear. I'm making here mea culpa here. So we have appellate judges that are located in São Paulo. They work with the entire macro region of São Paulo and the entire countryside towns and cities of São Paulo. So you might apprehend and last week, a judge stopped a car with nearly 8,000 kilos of cocaine. Sorry, not a car, a truck. And this traffic route is easy to detect. So I showed it to the appellate judges and said, look, we cannot apply the same situation to them. While scientists are able to solve with technicality the problems and with in-depth thinking, such as Dr. Egon and Dr. Marcelo, we, myself and Guilherme, we apply the penalty. The penalty is preventive and also has a retributive nature. Why preventive? You have to show society that if you commit a crime, you will lose the second largest asset you have, which is freedom. And why rewarding nature? Because you take from the citizenship the right to make justice through its own hands by removing a right that they had. So why did the prosecutor appeal? Because the judge applied the minimum penalty for that drug dealer of Populina, and for us it wouldn't be interesting to apply a minimum penalty at that society, for that people. It's people that their only leisure is when there's a circus at town or something like that. It's a community that lives in fraternity, everyone knows each other. And I was sad because after I wrote my opinion and attached it to the case file, I thought, well, there are police officers that know how frustrating this is. There's one police car every 2 towns, so the drug dealer is there, pressuring everyone, pressuring military policemen. There are 2 policemen. They pressure civil policemen. Sometimes the police officer operates in 2-3 cities. The population becomes a hostage, and the police car will leave Populina to go to Turmalina. The drug dealer will say, the policemen have left here, so you have to conceal our material, our merchandise. And then the police reaches the other town, it's not there anymore. So we don't have a way of preventing. We don't have a scientific way of solving the problem. To me, to Dr. Guilherme, we cannot apply the penalty. It's not the best case, but applying the law, enforcing the law, has an end to re-socialize the person and make this person understand the ill she was practicing, and that she comes back to society with respect and being a person that will build something. Is it working? If we look at each one of you, evidently it's not working. It is not working. Also because today people command much more than outside. So, in fact, going back to the first point, which is the topic of your Congress. Responsibility. We have social responsibility, societal responsibility, and state responsibility. I think actually that it's this responsibility is of the state. But according to Dr. Egan and Dr. Marcelo and Dr. Guilherme's conclusion, I would say that it is the duty of society to show the state the way, show the state that it's wrong. That it's wrong in terms of educational policies, all the other public and all other public policies. So I'm bringing you this reflection of political institutional nature and policies that submit to all of them. We're in a situation where we're divided by all political fronts, and this in fact is extremely complex. I'd like you to, give us a conclusion, final thoughts, so we could then hand the panel back to Paulo. Could we do that? First, you, Guilherme. Sometimes we forget that we are over 500,000 towns and cities in the country, as Dr. Consenso well said, of people that work, that wake up early, and that their dreams are are very high, much more than buying sweets with cannabis at the corner store. That's the reality. And I would like to thank Dr. Marcelo for his seriousness and the seriousness of his presentation and the data he exposed to you, and which were very frightening. If in a country, and if in Canada, the schoolers who come to Brazil, Dr. Marcelo, ask, why do you need to have a code for children and adolescents? To protect generations that come afterwards, to care for the children. Why do you need a code for that? If in these countries called civilized, highly civilized countries, that by rule children is treated as children, not in our country where we treat children as adults and treat adults as children. As my late father-in-law would say, Antonio Beto Matuto, he would say, after you open the door, you cannot, after you open the gate, you cannot hold back the cattle. So legalizing the joy in sobriety so that our children, as the names say, they can create and not school breaks that look like horror films. That is my humble reading of the situation. Thank you, Dr. Guilherme. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I convene you to be the activists of the good in favor of life. So with data and information that we have, and seek for new data and information, not let the culture of consumption of this drug and other drugs that harm so much our health, and this is proved, and we have tools and weapons in our hands. So let's make everyone aware. Thank you. I would like to thank everyone, and hoping that Brazil, we're capable of doing this, that Brazil can increasingly develop state policies. I think that he began his speech by saying, "My criticism is to Brazilian state as a whole. My negative reviews is against Brazilian state as a whole, at the state level, federal level. So it's not ideological. So we need a state that works. We do not have state policies. We are always changing and going back to the same point all the time and not progressing. So it's the issue is much more complex than defending or not legalization. This should be clear. Thank you, Marcelo. Now, Gerson. Whenever